be just as genuinely interested and curious and respectful about the way other people's brains work. That will be a huge unlock for you.
Going on, certified homies? Welcome to another episode of From A to B. You have Shiva, and I'm joined by a repeat guest, certified homie, Kingpin, Finn McKenty.
Kingpin, I like it.
That was the one I called you last time. You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember. Sorry. Bounded rationality. I can't remember everything.
There's a really interesting topic that I really want to nerd out with you about, but one thing I wanted to plug for you is I've been really interested seeing the clients that you've been working with on LinkedIn grow their reach. You've offered me a ton of free, awesome advice, and I super appreciate it.
I'm going to invoice you for it. You thought that was free?
Oh, shit, damn it. Well, oh, damn.
This is awkward.
All right,
we'll cover this later.
All right. I'm not looking forward to that, Bill, because the quality of stuff you've been doing is amazing. Like some of the people I've watched you grow their brands for has skyrocketed, the quality of their content, everything. It's really cool. So shit, maybe I do have to hire you to help me on actually, I don't need to hire you. My branding's perfect, amazing on brand.
There we go.
Okay.
That's right.
There we go. So you're not going to bill me.
Exactly.
I never get perfect.
I like it.
But if anyone wants to use Finn for like personal branding help, and I know you're kind of slowly trying to pivot into more like fractional executive roles like CMO or whatever. You're a smart dude, and I think there's some really cool things that I'm going to show the audience of how smart you actually are, but it's been cool to watch your journey and watch
handsome
you like
and humble and hilarious, and there's just so many things you could say about
all
me.
Of the H's.
Yeah.
You just every H word is exactly who you are. Yeah. So specifically what I wanted to dig into today with you about is we were DMing about this around a lot of people do quote unquote CRO, experimentation, optimization. A lot of people like have this subconscious mindset. It's interesting to explore that because I think there's a lot of hippos or people who may not buy into experimentation or optimization or whatever you want to call it. They do it in their like personal life or they do it in other avenues, but they don't pull it in like professional settings. So I wanted to explore why is that the case and figure out how can we maybe leverage some of that psychology into getting people and helping that buy-in for data-driven experimentation mindset. So that's the topic I want to discuss. First, the biggest question I'm going to ask is what have you optimized recently that's not work-related?
Well, I work out every morning, lift weights every morning, and that's pretty much I just apply a product mindset to that the same way as I think this is a good example of what you're talking about. Like anybody who's like sort of serious about fitness is basically applying like a CRO mindset of just constantly trying to iterate and optimize. And if you look back to where you were last week, probably not much of a difference. But if you look back to how you were doing things a year ago, probably a lot of small differences that add up. So for example, I started doing front squats again, and I just changed a couple little things about my foot position, and I realized it hit my quads way harder.
And it's funny because there's like, you could optimize for vitamins and intake and supplements. What are the KPIs? Well, there's probably some visual, like what's the Instagram apps, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, for example, like getting sore, like that would be one thing that's sort of a piece of data that I would watch over the next 48 hours is like, how sore am I?
Do you optimize for like compliments from wife?
She doesn't care.
She's okay. What about, do you optimize for like, you're not peaking at the results, right? You're not peaking at the results, 1 or 2 days after the workout, you're looking at longer term metrics.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, at this point in my life, I'm just really optimizing for health. I'm not trying to be a fitness model. I'm not a competitive athlete at this point. I maybe used to be a little bit, but I just want to like be healthy now. So that's a little bit harder to, it's a little bit harder to baseline, but that's sort of my perspective on it.
And I think it's funny because I'm the same way. I try you can't run an A/B test. Like you can't split your body in half and like test one body versus the other or one half versus the other.
But there's, like all the stuff you would see on like a hormone panel or a metabolic panel, like that would be, on a time series, I would look at all that stuff.
And that's like I guess that's more of a pre-post rather than like a pure A/B test. Still looking at data. And I think that where it feeds into the optimization cycle, so to speak, is like, it probably starts, it's like a chicken and egg situation. You can kind of start anywhere in the cycle, but it's like at some point you collect data, you analyze data, do a thing, try something, measure how that thing did, and then repeat. And you could add more data. You could do more things. You could analyze it more.
What are the leading indicators? What are the trailing indicators? I think we all wish, well, at least some of us wish we lived in a world in which, you could very, very clearly like have an objective function for whatever it is that you're doing. And if I know if I spend 5 more minutes on this, I'm going to get the following result. But that's not how very many things in life work that are actually meaningful or interesting. You may be able to optimize a button that way, but even then, not really. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this test shows whatever it shows, but you can show 10 people that test and probably 10 people are going to have an opinion about what it means. I think it's more intellectually honest and more productive to just say this is an educated guess rather than a deterministic, like exact result, because that's usually not the case.
It's an interesting conversation around framing. I know we talked about this before. My assumption was actually a lot of like prominent content creators, YouTubers, don't actually utilize data, and they're making content, it's great, but how much are they actually using data? And you gave me a little bit of peek behind the scenes where I had to adjust my own mental model. Like, no, they have a mindset of optimization.
For sure, yeah.
So like, talk to me about maybe like any instances that you've observed from like behind the scenes for that.
A simple example that everybody can understand. Go look up YouTube Studio. That is the dashboard that is shown to YouTubers, and it's probably the best like analytics product I've ever seen. And I've asked a number of people sort of in the analytics space, and they all like, yeah, it's the gold standard. It's amazing. But besides that, so if you upload a video, what you'll see is it will give you a ranking from 1 to 10 of how good it did compared to your last 10 videos. So 1 is the best, 10 is the worst. And then under that, it will show you a few other KPIs, such as watch time, click-through rate, average view duration. Every YouTuber on earth who is like good watches all that shit like to an unhealthy extent. And because it's multivariate, so you don't know, but you can tell if click-through rate is lower than average, but the video is doing well, then you're like, well, why is that? Okay, I see. Well, watch time is higher than usual. Why is that? Well, it's because I structured the video this way, I think. So they're just constantly looking at, I would say those are the 3 metrics of like click-through rate, watch time, and average view duration, click-through rate, average view duration, and views are sort of like the 3 things that you care about. And views are a product of those other 2 things. And so like that is your life as a YouTuber.
Would you say that that's an example of like a dashboard to an executive?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. In the same way as like, some execs that are into that sort of thing, somebody will build them a custom dashboard in Looker or something, and they have that shit open on their computer all the time. Like, that's how YouTubers are.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've been in part of companies where you like walk into an exec's office and they have a dedicated TV and it's burned in, like the dashboard's burned in on the screen.
Like, AOV's down 0.5% today. What's up?
Yeah, what'd you do? Like, I didn't do anything.
Well, what are we doing about it?
Right. So it's interesting because I want to push on that. You said I asked like it's a dashboard, right? A lot of the why and a little bit of the what, like nerding out a little bit deeper into the what and the why, and then what are we doing about it? I guess the how. That's not as obvious when you look at a dashboard like that, right? It's just top line level.
You can click way, drill way down into that.
Gotcha. So what, like, do you know of some examples where, like, if you've done the YouTube thing, right, or you've seen how it works, like, what would be an example if they say, oh, shit, this video underperformed? Well, how would they double click and optimize or look into that and investigate what happened? So, for example, one of the things you would look at is watch time. So let's say that your videos, and it'll tell you compared to average. So if it's underperforming, let me actually literally double click on this video and see what's going on. And it will tell you that less people are watching. It does a very good job of interpreting the numbers for you. So it'll say fewer regular viewers are watching this video, causing it to be less recommended to other people. And so you would go, okay, why is that? Well, this topic is a little bit outside of what I normally cover. So that means my regular subscribers didn't click on this video. Therefore, it's not getting recommended to more people, because the way YouTube works is it pushes out a video to like sort of the core audience. If they like it, it pushes out to a bigger one until it falls off. In that case, I'd be like, okay, well, I think I probably chose the wrong topic, and I would validate that by looking at watch time. So if the watch time is strong, I'd go, of the people who clicked on it, they liked it.
because the watch time is good. So that means I think it was the topic. However, it could also be something about the title or the thumbnail. So you don't know in these, just like most things, it's unclear what the answer is, but that's how I would sort of think about it. And by the way, what I described is how every YouTuber thinks all day, every day. Like, that's not unusual. They all think this way.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be a YouTuber for long, right? They wouldn't be able to eat and make the money that they need if they don't like follow this data-driven mindset. But it is interesting because this is helping to start formulating and bridging the gap between data and dashboards and what do we do about it. And it's so interesting to me that like YouTubers are data nerds at heart. They have to
100%. Yeah, they have to be.
They have to be. And us as experimenters, CROs, product owners, we have to be that way because it's like survival of the fittest. If you're not doing that, you're not going to be successful in the long term. You might have a couple good ideas here and there, but you're not going to be successful in the long term. But it is interesting to like be part of companies where perhaps there are senior leaders who will look at a dashboard and be like, oh, it's going down. Maybe they'll offer their own ideas, but maybe not. Maybe they just look at numbers and they're like, you tell me what we're doing about it. They're not invested or interested in the process, and maybe they delegate it. So I guess maybe I'm more just like, how do we work with people who will look at a dashboard like that and get them interested in moving beyond data into actually thinking about optimization, knowing that in their life, they probably do some form of like when they sat in their car, they optimized the seating position that makes sense for them, right? Everyone inherently has this, but why is it, I'm curious what you think, why is it that there's some people who just look at data, why aren't they optimizing?
I think because they have a different objective function than you do, meaning that they are optimizing for a promotion, or they're probably optimizing for something other than results, because in a lot of cases, results are actually less important. If my objective is to further my own career, in a lot of cases, results are actually less important than optics. And so they may be like, yeah, I know that nobody else is going to give a fuck about this number, therefore I don't either.
That's so interesting. So you're actually saying they are optimizing.
Yeah.
They're not optimizing for
the same thing. So if you want them to care, then you need to frame it like, this is what I spend all my energy on, is understanding other people's mental models. Like, persuasive communication is what I do. The question is always like, how do you fit the thing that you want into someone else's existing mental model? And for most people, data is not actually persuasive to most people. It just isn't. And every CRO, every product owner has seen this. Like, you show, hey, look at this chart. This is bad. And everyone's just like, eh. You're like, no, look. It's not persuasive, right? Or, someone is advocating for some idea and you're like, hey, we tested that, here's the results. And they're like, yeah, but still, let's do it anyway. And you're like, okay.
So it's really interesting. I just ran a copy upgrade on our website. So I ran it through an expert copywriter on our website. An expert copywriter took a look at the copy. Me and the paid search team and all the web marketing team, we all looked at the copy and we're like, this is amazing. It sounds so much better. This is awesome. We ran the test. It's tanked. Minus like 17% to conversion rate, which I'm surprised by, but it's not like I'm going to say, all right, fuck it, move forward and do the thing.
It's a little bit embarrassing, but you're like, well, okay, but what can we learn from it? What did I miss?
Exactly. And it's interesting because I built in guardrails to make sure with the test, an A/B test, I built in guardrails to make sure that I didn't just do the thing without measuring it or figuring that out. In an alternate reality where Shiva is not a CRO experimentation person, he's a big hippo who thinks he's the smartest person in the world, I would have shipped that decision and I would have said I optimized the page because I hit the goal of shipping the thing that I think is better.
That we all agreed is better. I don't need, why do we need to, it's obvious this is better. I don't care what your website says, this is better. Yeah, well, I mean, again, this just gets to understanding how other people make decisions. So one of the things I've been studying lately is basically like cognitive styles. So there's one model, there's lots of them, but one model, which I think is interesting, is empathizing, systemizing model. And so there, in this model, and you can take a test for this, You can take one will measure the amount of empathy you have, and the other will measure the amount that your brain wants to systemize things. Some of the questions, which people listening to this would probably be like, yes, I do that. Some of the questions on the systemizing one are like, when I'm on an airplane, I wonder how they built the wings. I'm like, oh yes, I do that.
There's significant overlap between system thinking and ADHD, right?
Yes. S-type thinking, yes, is correlated with autism and neurodivergence in general, yes. But extreme E-type thinking is correlated with other types of we'll call it like personality. Well, ADHD is not a personality disorder, but like the people who are sort of on the extreme E end of things may emotionally dysregulate in ways that don't serve them. Let's put it that way.
Could you give an example?
So dysregulation refers to people who have an emotional reaction that is disproportionate or inappropriate for the circumstances. For example, if you're like, hey, I made spaghetti, what do you think? And you're like, yeah, it's a little salty. And they're like, I worked so hard on this. Like, what's wrong with you? How could you say, I tried so hard. What's wrong with you? You hate me. I'm leaving. You're a terrible friend. And you're like, you just asked me what spaghetti was. Does that be an example of this person is dysregulated because they're, for whatever reason, like feeling very threatened by this. So point being is that E-type, S-type is only one way of like categorizing or like thinking about this. Some other like variables, like you could think of like idealism and realism on a slider. A lot of people like say, I would say like UX research people are more on the idealism side of things, whereas CROs would be more on the realism side. Like CROs, you're like, hey, I know we all thought this was the right way to go, but the data says blank. And then everyone's like, well, shit. Okay, well, we're going to do that.
Is idealism versus realism like more theoretical versus practical? Or is that?
Idealism is that you think the world should look like the following, whatever that is for you. You were driven to make the world into the thing, to resemble the way you think it should look. Realism would be more about accepting the world as it is and adapting to it. So a lot of like UX people are very idealistic in the sense of like, no, we have to do this because this is the right thing to do. Whereas, product people, I think would be more like, cool, but that's not what
the users are saying.
Yeah, or it's not doing. What, how the business works. So we're doing it this way. And they're like, but I don't care about the business. It's users, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, all right, well, users don't actually write our checks. The boss does. Another thing that I think explains a lot of behavior or decision-making in people is locus of control, which is there's like either internal or external. So an internal locus of control, you generally speaking believe that you have control over where your life goes. External locus of control means that you believe that things outside of you beyond your control like dictate your fate. And people who have an external locus of control generally are like less happy. So I think with like UX researchers, for example, and a lot of like creative people, they have a really tough combination of idealism plus external locus of control. So they think the world should be very different from the way it is, but they don't believe that they have the power to do anything about it. And so they're like very frustrated people, right? That's just one example. There's lots of different ways. This is why I read about like psychology and stuff so much. And the field like behavioral economics is another good one. All these different like heuristics and biases and stuff is like what I'm always looking for. If someone's not taking what I believe to be the correct course of action, or I think that they're like, they're engaging in some sort of distorted thinking, I just go down the list of like, I try to identify what their mental model is and what their cognitive biases are. And like, how do I slot what I'm doing into that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're almost doing like a heuristic audit of their personality type.
That's exactly what it is, yes.
Post-production Shiva here. We're about to jump into a really cool section about basically using a heuristic audit to audit your stakeholders instead of like websites. Really cool stuff that Finn and I jump into. But before we do, go do some free things to support the podcast. Like this episode, subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube, go sign up for our free newsletter from a2b.beehiiv.com, BEEHIIV, 2i's.com. It's free. Just need your email. You get clips, additional commentary. It's basically a companion to the podcast. Really great stuff. It's all free. Just need to know where to send it. Just need your email address. Also, if you're looking for some more dope content, From A to B is a partner with the Women in Experimentation Summit. There's no kickbacks or anything, but it's just, a really great opportunity for diversity, equity, and inclusion being promoted in experimentation. So I am all about that. From A to B is giving away some merch in addition to other people giving away some amazing things. In addition to the content just being rad. It's free. Go sign up. What are you doing? Go to tinyurl.com/FromA to B-WIE WIE for Women in Experimentation. If you don't want a tiny URL, just search Women in Experimentation Summit Convert. It's probably enough buzzwords for you to get there. Don't need the attribution. Again, not getting no kickbacks or anything. Just want to support diversity in the space. So go sign up. Go sign up to all the From A to B things. That'd be great. Now, let's get back to the show.
As we talked about before, I'm autistic, so I have to do that. I realized that this is just a life skill that I developed as an autistic person that happens to be useful in the context of work.
Agreed. I'm kind of the same way. And it's important to make sure that when you're having these conversations with stakeholders, you're auditing the parts of what makes them tick, what is valuable. I keep on going back to this in my head as we're talking about this. I came into this conversation hoping to figure out why are people who are leaders being hypocritical with optimization, because they'll optimize their chair where they sit, but they won't optimize the site, and they think everything is right. But that they're not being hypocritical. It's just different. It's just what they're choosing is different.
You know what they might say about you is they're like, Shiva, why do you give a fuck about all this stupid stuff? Nobody cares. You should just care about getting promoted. They're like, why do you give a shit about this stuff?
It's fair. To be honest, I do care way too much about this. No one should have a CRO podcast ever. It's a waste of life.
Both of these things are true. Like somebody has to care about the operational stuff or else the business doesn't run. On the other hand, it's also true that like, yeah, maybe we should, be a little bit more career oriented. So like I had one boss who was just a complete dipshit in terms of like anything operational, but he was very, very good at managing up and making himself visible and stuff. So if I wanted to persuade him, I'd be, because he cares very much what other execs think about him. He was a VP and I'm sure he wanted to be a C-level exec at some point. So I'd be like, hey, I heard so-and-so, the COO, talk about, how important this was. You remember in the last all hands when he was talking about such and such? I was looking into that a little bit and we should do the following to kind of ladder up to that thing he was talking about. And he wouldn't listen to anything I was saying in terms of like what we should do. But he'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, let's do that. Because all he hears is like, oh, you're going to make the COO happy? Okay, cool, let's do that. So he's optimizing for basically internal optics, which is, I would say, a pretty common thing for like execs because that's what they're good at, right?
And it's not wrong. Like, no. To be clear, sometimes you have to play the game.
For sure.
We talk about idealistic. I'm sorry, I forgot the dichotomy.
Idealistic and realistic.
Realistic, right? So the idealistic is you would hope you go into an organization that very much embodies data-driven. They look at a dashboard, they're excited, they're curious, they want to optimize, they'll support you, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of us in CRO and product live more in realistic of like, we have to navigate a lot of murky waters to get what we need done. And that sucks a lot. We have to sometimes be a little bit more, I guess, realistic. We have to be more realistic in playing the game, and it sucks.
But why does it suck?
It sucks because you want to I don't know. So let me give an example.
I'm asking that rhetorically, but yeah, go on.
Okay, fine. Fair enough.
No, but I'm challenging your assumption that it sucks because like, why does it suck? Like if your goal is to deliver results, if that means you have to do some stakeholder management to get there, then so be it.
That sucks. That's the part that sucks, right?
It's not fun for a lot of people. Yeah.
Because okay, in a perfect world, you could step into an organization that has experimentation banners, everyone's data-driven, everyone's happy to do it, and you don't have to convince anyone to run the tests. You don't have to get them bought into the process. You don't have to convince them to collaborate with you. Realistically, you have to fight for that shit every day.
Tooth and nail. Yep.
So that's where it's like, it sucks and you do have to play the game, and that's where it sucks and it's unfortunate that a lot of a CRO skill set should be dedicated more towards doing the experimentation process, but the reality is a lot of us have to play the politics game.
Everybody does. I mean, this is like the number of people in this world who are persuaded by sort of rational, like fact-based communication is not large.
Yeah, true.
If you expect things to work that way, like the first thing you need to do is like throw that in the trash because it's not how the world works. And so I would just let go of but don't be mad about it. Just understand, file this away in your own library of experiments is like, oh, when I'm trying to persuade someone, data alone is probably not going to do it.
Or data at all might not.
Sure, very likely. It's almost always irrelevant unless you're talking to one of the chosen few weirdos that cares.
Yeah, one of us.
Yeah, so which is why I go back to sort of that heuristic audit thing. This is the place where I think a lot of people really fall short. And I'm saying this as a fucking autistic person. Like, to talk about like soft skills for me is like, it's weird. I'm really, really, really good at managing up, which is weird, but I'm really good at it. And it's because I always I genuinely, patiently want to understand like what matters to you and how do I frame what I'm talking about in a way that will help you in what you care about. Does that make sense? Like, I want to help people.
I think that's the most important thing a product owner can optimize for. Let's go that route, right? You should optimize for help in many cases. And if you're optimizing for shipping your own ideas or moving your own shit rather than collaboration with the company, I think that's true with product. If we want to go tactically into like CRO experimentation roles, it might work. I don't know how long-term sustainable it'll be, but it might work occasionally. The goal should be optimizing for helping. And in many cases, it's simplifying messaging, giving them easy to digest stuff, not talking about like p-values, which another nudge towards the preach section, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, you should be optimizing for help. And I love that there's two parts. I think I want to help them, but there's another word that you inserted, which is genuine. I think you and I operate in a very similar model of authenticity and genuine. It's not like, all right, let me write down what are you interested in.
No, I don't do that shit.
Right. It's like, what do you actually want to do? Like, talk to me. Let's be human to human. Because I think I don't know if you should be a product owner or you should be in CRO if you don't actually genuinely want to help people. That's a wrong role for you.
You're going to have a rough time of it, that's for sure.
Sure.
So like with my boss I was talking about that I said was like kind of operationally an idiot and just cared about like internal optics. It's a little bit frustrating, but like it's not like I was mad about it. I'm just like, okay, well, this is what blank cares about. All right, well then let's work within that framework. Like it's the same with like, you think about like with users, I would hope you're not mad that they chose the green button instead of the red one. I mean, I just think idealism to me is there's a place for it in the world for sure. But I think in regard to product, it's tough because you don't get to choose what other people value. You just don't. It's not going to happen. If you think you're going to change the way that what other people value and why they value it, good luck. There's a small number of people who can pull it off. Most of them are like internationally famous politicians. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's trying to control the uncontrollable.
Yeah, which again goes back to like brain chemistry. So a lot of these things, like I was talking about the E-type, S-type thing, the neuroscience is beyond me, but to make a long story short, they can do brain scans and correlate this with differences in brain physiology. People with E-type have this part of a brain is bigger. I don't know, whatever it is. Like literally your brain is built differently. Do you think you're going to change the way that person thinks if this is a product of like brain physiology? Not going to fucking happen, which is why I don't get mad. I mean, of course I'm human. So like, yeah, sometimes I do get frustrated, but not really, because your cognitive style is what it is. Who am I to like tell you what you should or shouldn't value or how you should see things? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'll give you my opinion, but I just think that getting back to what you're saying is like genuinely respecting the way that other people see things and what they value, I think is like, that's the biggest unlock, because as soon as you do, everything gets way easier because you're not pushing against the river anymore. I mean, that's what is the case with so much of what I see from sort of, we'll call it a lot of people that are not in the product world that are not PMs. A lot of them are very idealistic and they spend a lot of energy pushing against the river. And it's because ultimately it's self-centeredness, because they think that their way of seeing things is more valid than other people's way. Well, who the fuck am I to say that the way I see things is better than the way you do?
And you could probably still disagree.
Yeah, of course.
But know that you still have to do it, right? Like, I hate paying taxes. You still got to do it.
And I understand why they exist.
Yeah. I still hate it, and I'd rather have more of my money, but I get it. I understand it. You got to pay into the system, because if I don't, I go to jail. So I got to do it.
Anybody listening to this that has that feeling of being so frustrated at the way things work, which I have had that feeling many times, I get it. The more you can accept things and not accept it in a sort of begrudging way of like, I've given up on, now I'm jaded and cynical. It's the opposite of being jaded and cynical. It's accepting in the same way as you are genuinely curious and interested in all the potential causal factors in your experiment, be just as genuinely interested and curious and respectful about the way other people's brains work. That will be a huge unlock for you.
Yeah, I hate that you use the example because I was about to blow your brain with the meta around the A/B testing, and you went into like, damn it, took my point. I think to build on that as well, I know we talked about like playing the game. I want to nudge your brain a little bit on this. You can disagree with them, but you could still work with them, and that's okay. And in fact, you should do that.
And by the way, they might be right.
True. You could be wrong.
I know it's hard for some people to imagine.
Yeah.
Have you have you ever considered the possibility that you're not always right?
Well, not me. I'm right with everything.
Yeah, no, of course. Why would I? No. We've controlled for that.
And that's funny.
Constant C equals I am always right.
It's funny because you might be working with someone who has never felt themselves to be wrong too. And you have to work within those parameters. I think that's a much harder conversation. That's a much harder nut to crack, to be fair.
That is a super hard one. Yes.
And maybe some of it is, if that's the case, right, you might want to play the game and give them the data to support what they're doing. I'm not saying this is like the most ethically sound thing, but it might be in a controlled fashion. You might have to give a little bit into their bullshit.
Of course.
To play the game.
Not might, you definitely will. Yeah.
Earn their trust, gain some credibility with them, and then you use that capital to push back on the other things, right? Like if I'm asking you to like help me move, Finn, you'd be like, absolutely fucking not. But if I said, well, actually that's a bad example because I would never, there's very few people I would actually help move. So that's a really bad example. I don't know, like you gotta give some to get some sometimes.
Deposits and withdrawals. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be transactional. It feels like things shouldn't be transactional, but sometimes with some people, they do operate that way.
Once again, you don't get to choose the way, the paradigm that other people operate in. Like if this person is a transactional cutthroat person, well, you got to take them as they are. They're not going to change. And if they do change, it's not going to be because of you.
So let's full circle all of this. What would be the parting advice or thoughts you would have on instilling people? I think a large part of it is when we think about people who are maybe optimizing in their life, the biggest takeaway for me is they're not hypocritical. They're still continuing to optimize. But really, they have different things that they're looking towards. And instead of like complaining, and you could privately complain, you have a diary. I fully support.
I don't support it, but that's another conversation.
You don't support diaries?
Privately complaining? No, I don't think it's helpful. Maybe a tiny bit in some ways, but I think generally it's not helpful.
Well, if I wouldn't necessarily want to tell my boss, which I'm not saying this is on the record. I hate my boss. Yeah. I very much like my boss. Purely hypothetical. But I don't know, if I had big issues with my boss, I wouldn't tell him publicly or passive aggressively post on LinkedIn. But I want to tell my therapist or I want to tell my diary.
Therapist, that's one thing. Yeah, but what I don't actually really think is helpful for the most part is people just like venting and complaining and ranting and shit like that. Think about this. Like imagine.
Wait a minute, but what if that makes me feel good?
Okay, but this is what I was about to say. Pretend that you had like a cortisol meter installed. When you're ranting about your boss for 20 minutes after work, do you think your cortisol went higher or lower?
Yeah, but that's a short-term metric. My cortisol spiked and then it went down lower afterwards because I finally got it off my chest.
Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know.
But that's how I work. I guess I think that's some people work that way. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't specifically know about cortisol levels, but what I'm saying is like in general, I think that expressing, and if it does work that way, yes, great. I agree. But like we're looking at like area under curve basically is the question here. A lot of people will tell you that they're doing something because it's cathartic and it makes them feel better. And it doesn't really. I think in a lot of times it just creates more negative energy that is not actually helpful or not serving you. Letting things go is generally, it's a lot fucking harder. That's for sure. It's real hard. But if you can let it go, then it's powerless over you. You don't need to like vent about it because you're like, I'm good.
The method I do to try and let things go is I will complain about it and then I will let it go after I complain about it.
If that really truly works for you, great.
I think it does. Sometimes it doesn't, but it has like a 70% hit rate for me.
70% is pretty good. Meaning, like, think there's a type of person, which I'm not saying this is you or everybody, but there's a type of person that's like always complaining about shit, and there's always like, this is not helping you.
Agreed.
You know,
there's certain things where you just keep on thinking about it, and you complain about it, and you keep on thinking about it. The more you think about it, the more you complain about it, which makes you think about it more. So that is a cycle of negativity.
Yeah.
For me, it's helpful to just like talk about it with a therapist or by diary or friends. And then as soon as I say the thing, sometimes my friends will be like, "You done?" I'm like, "I'm good."
Yeah. No, if that works,
I'll buy the next round.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'm curious, like, what would be your advice to help people let go? Because sometimes it's not as easy to just breathe and let it go. And you've had to deal with a lot of stuff in your personal life. That's why I'm curious, what advice would you give to me to like help myself let it go? Because I actually do have a hard time of letting go certain things.
Yeah, I would look up, there's a thing called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Look up, Google CBT distortions, and it will list, I think there's like 7 or so like major patterns of distorted thinking that, you know, distorted to the point of like being pathological or disordered. For example, catastrophizing. If your boss texts you that says, "Can you talk to me later?" You're like, "Oh shit, he's mad at me, which means I'm going to get fired. And if I get fired, then I'm never going to have a job in this industry again. And I'm going to have to go work at McDonald's. And then nobody's ever going to want to be my friend or marry me. And I might as well just go dig a ditch and jump in it right now. My life is over because my boss sent me this text."
By the way, I think that happens a lot in CROs, like who are like, if I don't get this one test out, it will cascade into never running a test again. And then they'll think it like 7 layers deep, when it's like, it's actually not necessarily going to be the case that if you don't run this one test exactly the way you want it to, it may not necessarily ripple, and you have to think about
that. So another one is like black and white thinking, meaning like, no, it's if it's not this, it's that. But is that really true? So just like always ask yourself these things. Like if you feel bad, there's a very good chance that there's some distorted thinking at the root of that. Identify what that distorted thinking is. The distortion is that you believe something is real that's not real. I have to ship this test. Do you? Why? Because blah, blah, blah. But what you just said, is that actually true? No, it's not. And that's not invalidating your feelings, because there's probably some kernel of truth there. Like, yeah, it would be better if you could ship this test for sure. Like, yes, we would like to test this, and it's better if we ship it now versus later for the following reasons, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't ship. So whatever, like, point being is like, identify these like patterns of distorted thinking. That will help you let go of things, because what you'll realize is that you're clinging to something because you believe that something is real that's not real. And once you realize it's an illusion, then you're like, okay, that's literally not, you know, it's like when you're a kid and you think that there's a monster in the closet and you're crying and screaming, and it's like, bro, there's no monster.
Right. Schrodinger's closet.
I mean, there could be, it's right. Could be a monster. You don't know.
Yeah. But I know I said we're going to end. I'm going to roll on one more thing here. We talked a little bit offline about like, there's a need for many people to feel safe, and it's very logical. When we look at the world in 2025, there's even more of a need for this to happen. And you look at, for me, I look at layoffs, I look at politics, I look at the world, I look at just stuff happening. And I'm like, I need stuff to be stable. I need it to be safe. And there's probably a lot of these other factors bouncing around that amplify maybe the most irrational feelings that kind of go into everything. So for example, I felt this like early in my career at Motive. I was like, I need to get my first test out because they hired me to do testing, but we don't have a testing tool. We don't have analytics, so I need to do that. But I keep on getting pressure to run a test, but I still haven't even picked a tool that we're going to onboard. We need to do that. And it's like, it's a bunch of stuff, and there's pressure and there's feelings. And my buddy got laid off, and I'm like, shit, am I going to get, and like, you just hear all of this stuff keep on ping ponging. And it's like, let me just retract into my safe space and just like, let things be sane and normal for a second. I'm sure a lot of people feel this in the tech space. I think in our lives, we all feel this, but specifically in our roles as like product owners and just in digital marketing as a whole. You know, you remember like in Looney Tunes or whatever, like when one of the characters would get mad and you'd see like the thermometer, you know, on them like turn red. Like if you feel that, whether that's anger, well, it's all fear at the end of the day. Like anger is just a form of fear, basically. If you feel that fear-mometer
rising in you, ask yourself why, and that gets back to the distorted thing. And not all, I'm not saying that all of it's distorted. Like it could be real. Like, yeah, like it is a tough job market right now. And it's totally rational and valid to, be worried about your job maybe. So that's not to say that it's invalid. It's just like, let's worry about the things that are real and not worry about the things that aren't real. So, okay, well, let's pick a tool. Like yes, you need to do that. But all the other stuff of like, that's not real. And then the second part of like the safety thing is that this gets back to like persuasion and influence, is understand what makes other people feel safe. Because anytime that you feel pushback from someone, so let's go back to the example of a stakeholder that, sort of blows you off or maybe even gets mad, because you've experienced this too, I'm sure, where you thought you were trying to help by saying, hey, this thing like didn't work and here's what we should do instead. And they get mad and you're like, what? Like, I thought I was trying to help. Well,
and by the way, that's its own A/B test for the heuristic. Like you ran the test you gave them something and you looked at the results and the results were stakeholder mad.
Yes.
And now you have to adjust and try something else. Right?
Exactly.
Statistically significant. He was mad.
Yeah. So if you want to persuade them to do the thing anyway, well, why is this person they're clearly feeling unsafe here? Why is that? Well, remember, like stakeholders have their own shit that they're worried about too. Like, I don't know, maybe this guy's supporting a whole family on one income and he's worried that anything that he ships that didn't work out makes him look bad. And he's like, I don't want you to, like, don't fucking come to me with telling me that shit's not working because like I'm already worried about my job. Last fucking thing I want is you telling me that something we're doing isn't working. He may be freaking out because he's like in my daycare and braces and blah, 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 like on a very human level like that. And if you look at it from that perspective, I treat everybody like they're my friend if I can. From that perspective, I might be like, hey man, just FYI, there's this thing. This is what it is, but I got it. It's taken care of. We're going to do this. Cool. Like, you don't need to worry about it. And then maybe he'd be like, yeah, okay, cool, great. Hypothetically speaking, it's like, how do you make other people feel safe? And that again gets back to like this heuristic audit kind of thing. It's all about like making other people feel safe. And you and I, and a lot of people like us, maybe we feel safe when we feel like we've reduced complexity in the world.
You're asking, let's try and make people feel safe. And then here we have a tool that comes and shatters that safety.
Exactly.
And we have to deliver. So I guess like the challenge here is it's easier to make people feel safe when you're like, I don't know, HR, and you're like trying to talk to them and be like, we're not going to lay you off. Here's the email, blah, blah, blah. And there's the thing. But for us, it's like, here's the data that proves you're wrong. And that's a direct contradiction to your safety. And how do you soften it when sometimes you literally have to tell them the harshest truth?
Do you have to? That's another question. Do you have to? So here's another thing I would tell everyone is like, you don't have to like tell people the truth unless it's your company. And it's like, actually, like the reason why YouTubers like can't run from the truth is because they fucking go out of business if they aren't willing to confront the truth. But most people don't give a shit about the fate of the company. They only care about their paycheck and stuff. And so it's like, maybe just don't tell them.
Yeah, I think so I'll challenge you on that. Because in a scenario where, let's say I'm the product owner, or let's say I'm a person who is running an experiment. I have data that I need to show the product owner the thing that they're trying to ship that they're really excited about, that they already sold the board and the leadership team on. By the way, there's no data that shows that this is going to work. That's the breakage of safe space. So how would you approach that if you were?
Well, it depends on the fact pattern. So I don't know. But let's put it this way. How many times have we seen an entire organization basically do a Jedi mind trick on themselves to convince themselves that this feature that's clearly a failure was a success? All the fucking time, right?
Sure.
All the fucking time. And you're looking at the data and you're like, I don't know what the fuck you're looking at because that definitely is not a success. But everyone's like, yeah, great job, team. Like, nice work. Nailed it. And you're like, no, you didn't.
So this is where we're talking about, we're going back to idealistic versus realistic again, right?
Yeah, but it would be suicidal for you to raise your hand. And you've seen probably some people do this sometimes, like in the all hands, that's not what this, and you're like, oh my God, what the fuck are you doing, man? Shut up.
Yeah. It sucks. By the way, this is why I hate this conversation, because our lives would be so much easier if we could just live in that realistic, idealistic scenario where you were free to raise your hand and be like, hey, that sucks. But if you raise your hand and say, yeah, that sucks, to a person who has the ability to just fire you for disagreeing, I'm not saying this is good life advice to just always keep quiet. You have to understand the dichotomy and the business, and you have to be able to.
But sometimes sometimes shutting your mouth is like, I will give you a fundamental truth of most organizations, not all of them, but most of them. If people like you, they will find a reason to interpret everything you do as a success. And if people don't like you, they will find a way to discredit anything you do, even if it is a success.
I think what you're saying is effectively just pick your battles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now sometimes you still got to be like, if your job really does rest on telling people an uncomfortable truth, then maybe you got to tell them.
If that's the case, I mean, I hate saying this, but you really have to revisit your like company.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you fucked up by just sort of, I would ask a question like, how did you end up here?
If you're going to get in trouble for saying, hey, I think the thing you're doing might not be good, you're at the wrong place. I'm sorry. That's a toxic environment.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't, but like there's layers, right? You could raise your hand and say, hey, by the way, but if they ship it anyway, and that's their accountability and that's their decision making, and they live and die by that sword,
cool.
We have to let that go. That's not our decision made. We might feel passionate about shipping that decision, but that's not our decision to make. Yeah, so it is a little complicated.
Well, and again, like, these are all like personal, but so much of this, again, goes back to sort of identifying our own mental models and what makes us feel safe and sort of all these things is like, for some of us, and by the way, a sort of extremely strong sense of justice and fairness and truth is an autistic trait. And I'm not saying that everyone who feels that way is autistic, but like it is like a thing. That sort of feeling of like, no, I have to do this because this is right and this is true. That may, like, I have that feeling. And there are times in which that's actually dysfunctional for me because, like, do not ever, 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 ever put yourself out for the fate of a product that you don't fucking own. Don't ever fall on a fucking sword for someone else's fucking business. That's stupid. You're in the game of optimizing for yourself and your family. And if that means someone else's fucking stupid idea ships, fine. Who gives a fuck? Like, you tried, you show them, hey, here's my opinion. If they don't want to listen, fuck them. Who cares? Fine, be fucking stupid and ship your stupid idea. I tried to help. I don't give a fuck.
It's so important to make sure you do try in the safest way for you.
Exactly.
But in the way, like, you have to try. Because I think just to be clear, you're not advocating for keep silent when someone's doing something shitty. That's absolutely not what you're saying. Like, when I say something shitty, I mean, if someone's about to ship something terrible and you feel like you might get in trouble, it's not necessarily say nothing and then always protect yourself.
No. There may be times in which that's the only safe option for you if you're in a really toxic environment, which some people are. Hopefully that's not the case. But like, I think what you said is very smart. Is like, surface it in the safest way possible. Don't go to 10. Don't like send the deck to everyone that's like, this is going to fucking fail and here's the 500 reasons why. Because most people will be very threatened by that. There's some small number of people who will be like, oh, shit.
Back to safety.
Yeah, some small number of people will be like, oh, damn, thank you. Like, this is amazing. Like, you saved me from making the wrong decision. That's like a tiny number of people. Most people will feel threatened by it because it makes them look stupid or makes them feel stupid or whatever it is. So surface it is like, hey, this seems really cool. I'm excited about it too. We did an experiment with the following results. Let me know if anyone wants to talk about it.
You have to think about, like, are you doing it one-on-one with that person? Or are you doing it in the all-hands meeting, right? Big difference.
Huge difference.
And I think people interpret that and they understand it when it's, even if it's like a marketing meeting or a small meeting versus one-on-one, like, hey, dude, let's talk about this. I want to talk to you about something just so we're on the same page. And it's, I'm not trying to call you out. I'm trying to help you. The safetiness is, it's seen as less of a threat when you go that route. Yes,
exactly. Again, getting back to be like genuinely wanting to help them, people will...
Exactly. True.
Unless someone is like really dysfunctional, they will be able to tell. I tell people uncomfortable things a lot and they don't get mad because they can tell that I'm genuinely trying to help them. And I say, based on my understanding that you want to do the following, my opinion is blank. It's your choice, but this is my guess of how it would go.
I gotta say, you gotta open up your new YouTube channel. It's not Finn McKenty Punk Rock MBA. It's psychology PhD, right?
Well, I mean, it's just, these are all just things I had to figure out the hard way. That's it.
Yeah, incredibly smart things. All right, I think we're ready to jump over to the next section. So what is it time for?
It is time to preach.
Let's go. So this week's preach comes courtesy of Samuele Mazzanti. Oh God, I am so sorry, Sam.
Now you know how white people feel when they try to say your name.
True. See, that's why I've never been offended at anyone who tries to pronounce my name, because I have been gifted the curse of, or I've been cursed with never being able to pronounce anyone else's name. I'm going to breeze through this thing because I think it's relevant to what we talked about. So he says, I'm just going to blind react to this one sentence. Statistically significant adds zero value to business decisions.
99. Yes, that's mostly true. Yes.
And so he goes on. It's like it's an arbitrary concept. It's based in math and stats, but the words themselves don't always mean exactly what you think it is.
Especially if we want to nerd out about it, especially if it's not paired with effect size, then that's a huge part of it.
And what is the value you've declared? Because some people's p-value of 0.05 is someone else's 0.0001. Right. And it creates a false sense of certainty. And by the way, I think that's what a lot of like A/B testing tools and what other CROs tell other people. It's stat sig. So people see that as green check, do the thing, no risk, no harm. It won. It's better. There's other things associated with it that doesn't necessarily get brought along for the conversation.
I think a very important footnote to this conversation is, what are we working on? Are we working on a modal window in the account settings part of a SaaS app, or are we working on jet engines or medical devices? Two very different things.
True.
If we're working on a medical device, yes, I want a airtight rationale that we're making the right decision. If it's a modal, all right, so we roll it back if it's wrong.
I think that's a conversation around risk profile. And with a modal and a risk profile, the world's not going to end with a modal, probably. It might, but probably not. Versus cancer treatments and planes, you need that shit tight, 100%. So that's a big thing, risk. Risk isn't brought along with the conversation of stats.
So don't apply overly rigorous methods to low-risk decisions, because that's an inefficient use of resources.
Beautifully said. Sam continues, or he concludes with this whole thing, like, the approach moves us from statistical jargon to meaningful business decisions. We have to think more broadly, other than, here's the thing we're doing, checkbox stat sig. It's a broader conversation. That doesn't necessarily mean bring p-values, but talk about the risks, talk about why the decision's being made, talk about the data. Stat sig doesn't just always mean do thing because green.
Because again, let's get back to what is the gold standard of science. It's predictive success. And the results of your experiment are what they are. We all know that if it was as easy as just throwing a bunch of data into some statistical operations and throwing a bunch of compute at it, like if it was that easy, there would be no failed products, but there's tons of them. So it's silly to think that statistical significance or anything else equals good decision making. It's not that simple. I wish it was.
Right. There's a whole other conversation around AI is being sold as being able to do that entirely wrongly, but we're not going to touch on that. We've hit about an hour here. Finn, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the time you've taken to almost be just CRO therapy for me for today. It was amazing. What are some cool things you want to plug here? I know you got like your consulting gig of helping, people up level their brand and their profile and stuff like that, but anything else you want to plug? I want to
plug introspection and applying that heuristic audit to yourself, as a consistent minute by minute practice.
Amazing. Parting words from Kingpin, Finn McKenty. Thank you so much for
having me.